Meet the gang and follow them as they investigate immunisation. Find out how, why and when you should get vaccinated.
Just looking for this song. Ugh, I can't remember what it's called. It's so annoying.
Well, actually, we're meant to be doing our project on vaccination.
It's really boring.
No, it's actually quite interesting, really. You go on this game and you find out how diseases start and spread from person to person.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Not.
No, really, it's actually very interesting. You get to find out how they spread from one person to another.
The great thing for me about vaccines is that you can prevent disease happening at all. And it's the only area of health, I think, where you've got the potential for completely wiping out the disease. So, for example, 200 years ago, smallpox was a big killer. It used to kill 1 in 5 children. Today, smallpox doesn't exist anywhere in the world because of vaccination.
Would that actually happen?
Yeah, but there's drugs that can stop it. If you get all your jabs, you'll be fine.
What do you mean, jabs? Well, your vaccination, your teenage booster vaccination. I've never heard of that before. Well, tell you what, while we're doing the project, we'll show you what it's all about.
Hi, I'm Vicky. That's Vaccination Internet Computer Information. You have accessed this website to find out more on vaccinations, and everything you need is right here. You can hear real-life stories about preventing the spread of disease and why you definitely want to be protected. Just click on any of these topics and I will take you there. Each topic begins with Expert Facts by Richard Roberts, which is followed by a real-life story about immunisation. Let's get started. Great, you have clicked on Travel the World. Being covered and having all the right vaccinations can protect you so that you could do so many things. You might want to go on holiday, take a gap year, or travel around sightseeing. Vaccinations will keep you healthy and safe if and when you decide to travel.
From a personal point of view, you'll be exposed throughout your life to a range of infectious diseases. So, for example, if you were to travel to Afghanistan, as some of the soldiers are, or to India or to Nigeria, you would be boosted against polio, because the polio threat exists in those countries, but also in other countries. So we give everybody polio to make sure that polio doesn't spread. Diphtheria, again, there are areas of the world, particularly the old Soviet Union, where diphtheria spreads quite easily. So we protect people against diphtheria. Then with tetanus, tetanus is a disease that you can pick up from like deep injuries you can get from the soil. It's penetrating injuries. It's present everywhere. It's not spread person to person. So a tetanus injury is something that you can be exposed to at any time, wherever you are. So that's the reason that we protect people, is because the risk of infection is there.
Before you go travelling, you've got to really have an itinerary of where you want to go, because you don't want to end up in an area that perhaps isn't as tourist friendly as others. So, do the research, make sure you know what clothes you need to prepare, and of course the vaccinations, which will come in your research, because certain areas have a higher risk of certain diseases. So that had to be taken into consideration, because the last thing I wanted to do was to get to Asia, the first time I've ever been, and get ill and ruin the trip. So vaccination was important for that part of the trip. And the jabs are exactly what they are, just a jab. So you go and you get covered and then that's it. There's no other worries. I mean, when you're in school, you don't necessarily think about the vaccinations. You're more excited about going to the country and seeing what it's like. So it's not in the forefront of your mind. But when you go there and perhaps something might happen, like it did to my younger brother, you realise that being covered for tetanus might have saved him, you know, a really nasty infection, or, I mean, even worse. So being covered is worth it, just for the hassle-free holiday and being able to enjoy yourself with whatever else that you want to do. In order for us to go and see these amazing places, you've got to take advantage of the vaccinations just to cover yourself and go and travel the world.
I really wanted to do something completely different, and I thought if I'm going to go travelling, I might as well go somewhere that's going to really take me out of my comfort zone. A couple of years before, when I was in year 11 at school, we did a trip to South Africa, so I'd already kind of had like a kind of connection with Africa and wanted to go back there because I had such a good time. Well, the company that I went with, obviously, they really advised you to go and talk to your GP as soon as you'd made arrangements to go on the trip. So I went and talked to them and they explained what jabs that I'd need and what medication I'd need to get before I went out there. I'd had my tetanus booster anyway, so I knew I was covered for that. There's one story that comes to mind particularly. Two of the other volunteers I was staying with were working in this orphanage, and one of the little boys, he must have been, we don't really know how old he was because he didn't know himself, and he hadn't been turning up to the orphanage, and so they decided to go and see where he lived and to find out where his parents were, and they found him sleeping on a pile of clothes at his next door neighbour's house. And when they talked to their neighbours, they found out that their parents, his mother had died and his father was an alcoholic and had run off, so he was on his own. So they brought him back to the house. We gave him a bath, we gave him new clothes and got him all clean, and they took him to the hospital because he had a very poorly stomach. He'd been complaining of stomach ache a lot. So they got him to the hospital and paid for all his medication. If he had been vaccinated from a young age, then he probably wouldn't be in half the trouble that he was in. It just made me realise how lucky we are that we've got, you know, the health service, you know, just how we need it. And if you're going to a different country, to make sure that you have taken advantage of it so that you're safe, because at the end of the day there might be things out in the other countries where people who live there, they're not affected by it, but as soon as you go in as a foreign body, then you're very susceptible to get those kind of diseases.
If you don't get immunised, when you travel or when you meet somebody with a rash or an infection, you're putting yourself at risk of catching the infection yourself. And all of these diseases, most of them are unpleasant, but some of them can have serious complications. And that's why we immunise.
Excellent choice. You have clicked on preventable diseases. The amazing thing about vaccinations is that they can stop you from getting ill. Preventable diseases have horrible symptoms. Mumps can make a boy's testicles swell to the size of grapefruits and can stop them from ever having children. Rubella affects girls during pregnancy and can cause miscarriage or the baby to have severe disabilities. Ultimately, we forget that these diseases can kill.
The childhood programme is intended to protect people for life against a whole range of diseases. And against diphtheria, tetanus and polio, you need 5 doses to complete the course. And the teenage immunisation, from around 14 to 17 years of age, is the last of those 5 doses. And that's meant to boost your immunity right into adulthood. And it's also the last chance to catch up on other vaccinations which you might have missed. So, for example, lots of children in secondary schools have missed MMR for various reasons. The teenage booster is an opportunity to give that. Similarly, meningitis C, everybody who goes off to higher education is recommended to have meningitis C vaccine. The teenage booster is an opportunity to check that that's up to date.
It was the 1st of November in the early afternoon when my wife Debbie called me at the office to say our little boy Joshua was not very well. He was not his usual self when he awoke from his midday nap. Normally he would stand in his cot and shake it and try and get out. This time he was just lying there. Although awake, he could not lift himself into a standing position. Debbie called our doctor, who suggested she gave him Calpol. She called the doctor again at 4, by which time I had decided to go home early. The doctor came out at 5 and examined Josh. He said that Josh should go to the hospital just as a precaution. Debbie wrapped Josh in a blanket and sat in the back of the car with him while I drove. We arrived at the hospital at 6 p.m. We then noticed a small pinprick rash on his stomach. We were told that Josh was suffering from suspected meningitis. I remember thinking, thank God they know what's wrong with him. Josh was eventually moved to the intensive care unit at 12:30 a.m. During the following hours, his heart stopped. The doctors managed to get it going again, but his fight for life had only just begun. All the next day, we're praying he was going to be all right. But at 7 p.m, just 24 hours after being admitted to hospital, his heart could not take any more, and his breathing stopped. I held Josh in my arms. The devastation and emptiness is something I can never forget. Only parents who have been through a similar experience can imagine the pain this terrible disease causes. Josh's death has completely changed my life.
Hi, my name is Vic and I'm 16. I want to tell you about when I had mumps. I had mumps last July. I caught it off my 19-year-old brother who's a student at university. I can honestly say that it was horrible and something I wouldn't want to go through ever again. I can still remember it now. My mates and I had decided to have a kickabout after school because it was a really nice day. At lunchtime I felt like I was getting a sore throat and it hurt when I chewed and swallowed my food. Last lesson, I just felt really tired. I told my mate I wasn't up to football and went home. I went to bed and slept until my mum came in from work. When she woke me up, my neck had swollen up. The pain caused from the swelling was unbearable. I was unable to move my head up or down or from side to side, and it felt as though my head was going to explode. My mum got the doctor and she said that she thought I had mumps. Because mumps is viral, there are no drugs to make it go away, so I had to let it run its natural course. The doctor said to get lots of bed rest and plenty of drinks. I felt awful for about a week, and my face stayed swollen for ages after the pain had gone. I felt really down because I didn't want any of my mates to see me swollen up, as it looked horrible. I got mumps because I hadn't had all my vaccinations. I had my MMR as a little child, but not my booster. If I'd known, I definitely would have had it done. If I ever have children, I would never put them at risk of getting mumps, and personally, I think that everyone should get covered, as mumps could be wiped out if everyone got the right vaccinations. It isn't worth it for one small thing to feel so ill and to miss the things you really want to do.
If you don't get vaccinated, you miss that last opportunity as a teenager to be boosted for life. So you're more likely, if you encounter these infections, to become infected. So that's the risk if you don't have your booster. And for something like MMR, there are, in Wales in secondary schools, there are about 40,000 children who have missed either one or both doses of MMR. To be fully protected against measles or against rubella or mumps, you need to have 2 doses. And measles is still very common worldwide.
We can be safe from diseases. For example, cervical cancer can now be prevented by the HPV vaccine for girls. Yet, cases of preventable diseases continue to grow as some people still don't get vaccinated. Measles and mumps are on the increase.
I've come in to have my MMR booster because I found out I haven't actually had it, so my mum's told me to come in to the GP and have it done. I had my HPV vaccination in school, but obviously I had to come here to have my MMR booster. The vaccination will boost me for measles, mumps and rubella. And I'm actually quite nervous. I don't like needles. I've just come out from my MMR booster and it wasn't even actually that bad, it just felt like a small pinch. So I'm actually really glad I've had it now, so I'm protected against measles, mumps and rubella. Definitely go have your MMR booster, and it isn't even that bad, it's just a small pinch, so it's easy, over and done with, and it protects you. Definitely ask your parents who've had your MMR booster, because if you haven't, then you won't be protected. So either go to school and ask someone about it, or go speak to your GP.
One of the reasons that in the 1990s measles more or less disappeared in the UK is because we had high rates of immunisation with MMR. So when MMR came in 1988, within a few years, more than 90% of children were having it. So when somebody, for example, went on holiday, caught measles, they had a great time because it takes about 10 days for the disease to show itself. They come back feeling fine, they go to school, they begin to feel unwell and they start to spread the measles virus. In the mid-90s, there were enough people immunised, so friends of that infected person, for them not to be infected. So the disease didn't spread. And so measles was controlled and we went down to very low numbers of cases. The more people who are susceptible to an infection, the easier it spreads. So there is a benefit from immunising people even if you're not immunised yourself. And that's one of the things that currently protects those youngsters who've not had the MMR vaccine. Because everybody else has had it, the disease doesn't spread and so they're less likely to encounter it. And that's called herd immunity. When everybody around you is protected, even though you're not, it can protect you. So that's a benefit, but it depends on everybody else being vaccinated. But it does offer some protection until you start to travel. And once you travel, you become exposed to infections which at home you may not be exposed to.
Thanks for visiting me, Vicky. I hope this site has been useful. So, what should we do to get the correct vaccinations? Find out what vaccinations you have already had and if there are any that you have missed. Find out what vaccinations you are due to have in the near future. Speak to someone at home, a teacher or your GP about when and where to get vaccinated. To find out more about vaccinations, go to www.immunisation.nhs.uk or call NHS Direct on 0845 46